people in now. I've started the YouTube live stream as well, and I guess once hopefully more people probably join in the middle, and then on YouTube, people will probably watch that as well. So I think we can just start. I'll let everyone in, and then Ryan, if you could keep letting other people in, that'd be great. All right, yeah. Hello everyone, and welcome to the CPI Problem Setting Workshop and Q&A. We're thrilled to see so many people here today, and we hope that this workshop will either help you sort of break into the field of problem setting or enhance your future preparation for like use code contests. Joining me today are Akash Kakale, Benjamin T, and Suez Nagar, names you might recognize from the problem credits of numerous use code contests and problems. If you have any questions during our discussion or like a burning question that you'd like to submit right away, we will already open our Q&A form. I think Ryan Cho can send that in the chat. And then during the Q&A session at the end, I'll sort of address the most interesting questions submitted throughout our session and during the Q&A segment. Yeah, so our schedule for today will kind of be panelist introductions, then a panelist discussion on various problem setting topics, and finally, an open Q&A session with the most interesting questions from the forum. So I guess we can sort of kick things off with panelist introductions. Panelists, please share your name, state, and some of the contests you contributed problems to, as well as a fun fact about yourself or your favorite algorithm. I guess we can go alphabetically, so starting with Akash and then Ben and then Suhas.
Okay. Hi, I'm Akash. You said state, so I'm from California. I'm a senior in high school. I've done problem setting as part of the USACO Guide Informatics Tournament, Codeforces Global Round 27, and I've also contributed one problem for USACO. Um, my favorite algorithm, uh, I think my favorite like technique is CDQ divide and conquer.
All right, then I'll start. I'm Benjamin. I'm from New Jersey. I've been, I first participated in USCO around like, I think it was the 2015 to 16 season, which was actually the first season where there were four divisions. Let's see. I started problem setting after I graduated high school. So I believe that was the 2019 to 20 season of USCO. And I've been setting problems since then. Most of my problems have already appeared in USCO, but I think a few have appeared elsewhere, like as like one of the last problems in like the code forces round, or one of them that was submitted to written jointly and submitted to EGOI. Fun fact, I won IOI in high school.
Okay, hi, I'm Suhas. I'm based out of California. I'm a recent graduate from UCLA. I guess I started competing with USICO, I guess roughly December 2018. And I started problem writing after I graduated high school as well. I guess competitions that I've authored for include CodeSprint LA, which is, I guess, a smaller competition, but more based out of college, USICO as well, and ICPC. And I guess favorite algorithm, I guess favorite technique I would say is greedy. I think it's always just fun and it always blocks you and you can't always see it, which is fun. But yeah.
All right, yeah, thanks everyone. Now that we've kind of gotten to know our panelists a bit, let's dive into the discussion. Our first discussion topic today is just going to be like how to start problem setting, and I'd like to ask all the panelists how you first got into problem setting, what sparked your interest, and what were your first steps. Also, what resources, communities, or contests kind of help you along the way, and any advice for beginners on how to get involved. We can just go in the same order as the introductions, I guess, so starting with Akash.
Okay, so I first started problem setting for actually my high school's club. So I guess me and some of the other officers, we wrote a contest for the club members to kind of just like practice, get better, and then we'd give out prizes. And so it was not very high stakes. So I could had the opportunity to like practice writing problems. And the more I wrote like, more problems, I kind of got a better idea of like what I have to do to make problems like interesting, or like what kind of ideas are good, or is this standard? And then general tips, I think problem setting is a lot like problem solving in a way that if you write more problems, you'll get better at writing problems. Like I think sometimes people think they have to be like really, really good, like Ben, who's like LGM, right? But if you write more problems, I think you can generally get better at problem setting.
Sure. Let's see. When I started problem setting, I guess it's like similar to what Akash said. I actually like was the captain of the math team at my high school when I was I think in 10th grade, and I like we would set some problem sets to like select teams to go to like competitions, like local competitions, like the Disney University competition, and like usually like in the past we just usually like use some like past contest prompts to select, but like so but then this time I like decided to like switch it around a bit and like try to come up with like some like I guess not completely copied. Well, not completely copied, not necessarily like completely original, but like just like some like come up with some at least partially original problems on my own that like I think would be like educational to test. And so yeah, I guess it sort of started around then. I guess for competitive programming, I didn't really problem set anything until like my last year of like uh attending musical training camp, I guess. Like we have this like annual session at training camp where like you'd like try to come up with your own problems with like a partner. But I feel like my attempts usually like did not end up that great, but I think over time they got like a little better. And like by the last year, I had some ideas which I thought would be like good enough to like use in like the next contest season, and they did end up getting used. So yeah, I guess it was just I don't know a gradual evolution. Uh, as for resources, I can't say there were any like particular resources. Just like if you like, I guess it's mostly it's just like you look at some like existing problem and then well, for me, it's mostly like you look at some existing problem and you think like, oh, like I think it would be like a lot more interesting if you changed it this to like that, and then like the solution comes like completely different, and then you're already like it's potentially a long way to like making a new problem, which like counts as your own. So yeah,
Yeah, sure. So for me, I guess my thing is a little strange because I never really did code forces. I kind of never had any formal introduction to problem setting. This was kind of a thing where I was like, I would solve problems and then I would go home and then kind of like the more you solve problems, the more you start to see these like structures or paradigms that appear a lot in problems kind of show up in the real world. So for me, I would play this video game called Marvel Contest of Champions. It's a game that I don't think many people really know about, but one of the fun little things that happens in the game is like there's these quests, which are basically like you travel around and beat a bunch of enemies and move on to the next part of the quest. And what ended up happening is I noticed the structure of the quest would often be a graph, and oftentimes what I would have to do is like farm for potions in this graph, and I was like, oh, this is such a tedious task. If only there was like a better way I could actually like do this. If I knew where the potions would appear, then I could like easily farm the potions. And then I don't know, like kind of you start thinking about that and you're like, wow, like this sounds like something that could be a problem. And then like, that is maybe a very difficult problem, right? Like graphs have way too many ways that they can be constructed. And then you're like, okay, I can like reduce this down to a tree. And this is just an interesting thing to think about in my free time. So that ended up actually becoming a problem. I guess the first problem I wrote was potion farming, which I think ended up showing up in Yusuko well down the line, many years down the line. But I guess it's kind of this thing where it's like the more you solve problems, the more you start to notice that like these things kind of appear in your everyday life, or maybe things in your everyday life can be translated into a problem. And I don't know, from there it kind of like, oh, like it becomes this fun little game of like, how can I turn the things that happen in my life into a problem? So I guess that's the way that I kind of got started, which I guess is a bit unusual. As far as like formal resources, it's pretty hard. I think having friends who problem set, like I came to UCLA and there was this uh, Code Sprint LA competition that ended up happening that a lot of people were like, oh, you have ideas for problems. Like we can kind of turn that into a reality. Because like it's really easy to, or not easy, it's like it's a lot easier to ideate problems on your own, but like once you ideate it, it's kind of like where do you go? So I guess like finding the outlets is helpful of like where can you actually like turn these problems into a thing that other people can solve, whether it's like, hosting your own platform or maybe like joining somewhere else like Code Forces or local competition type thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's nice to see like a lot of diverse experiences in prompt setting, and knowing that you can sort of get into it no matter what your background is pretty encouraging. To those of you just joining and for everyone on our YouTube live stream, I think you can, if you have any questions that come up, you can again submit them into the Q&A form. We'll be collecting questions throughout the discussion and then going over them through the Q&A session. So kind of look out for that and think of some questions that you'd like to ask our panelists. Our next topic, I guess, is problem ideation, or how you come up with problems, which is, I guess, the hardest part of problem setting. So, and I'd like to ask our panelists where you usually find your inspiration. I think Suhas recently just told us pretty cool inspiration, but are they based on like real world ideas, like math concepts or variations on classic problems? Then how do you kind of decide what makes a easy, medium, or hard problem? And finally, can you walk us through one specific problem you've written and share how like the idea formed, evolved, and how it morphed into the problem that we saw on a contest? So yeah, again, starting with Akash.
Okay, so generally, I think there's like a couple different ways to come up with a problem. So sometimes you can like start with some problem and then solve it, and then sometimes maybe you want to build up the solution backwards. So for me, I usually start from the problem and try to solve it, or maybe I start somewhere in the middle where I have a couple of ideas, and then maybe I'm trying to like work backwards and forwards in a way, so where you can kind of come up with a problem like that. Sometimes I just misread a problem and there I got another problem. But if I have to come up with a problem like completely from scratch, I don't usually like look for real world. I kind of think about like kind of like structures that I often see come up in competitive programming. So it can really be anything like a binary string, just an array, a tree, a sequence of some kind, a cyclic array. It can be anything that you often see in a competitive programming problem. And then I kind of think about like what's some restraint that I can impose on this, or what's some condition that I can impose on this, or maybe what's some operation that I can do on this. And then I try to see how that kind of interacts with the structure, and then maybe I try to come up with an interesting question from that, where like, oh, I can see that, you know, there's this thing that's interesting, and then maybe I can ask a question that kind of like utilizes that observation. And I think you had a question about how I come up with easy problems. And so typically I don't think I aim to come up with an easy problem. I just try to come up with a lot of problems, and then I ask people to test them and then figure out which ones are easier and which ones are harder. Because I think generally it's pretty hard to figure out which problems are easier, which problems are harder yourself, because you have a pretty warped difficulty of like your own problems. And so this also applies to coming up with problems that are like harder. So a lot of times you'll come up with a problem and you won't think it's as hard as it actually is. And that's because a lot of times when you come up with a problem, it's because it's maybe in your area of strength. So like you're good at solving this kind of problem. And that's why when you made this problem, uh, yeah, it ended up being harder than you thought it was. And also for coming up with harder problems, it's not like you're in a contest. You don't have to solve this problem in the next 2 hours. You have pretty much infinite amount of time. You can keep thinking about the problem until you come up with a solution, or you keep modifying it until it turns into something that you think is interesting. There's no time pressure at all. And so yeah, that's I guess for coming up with hard problems, that's the main things. I can go over a couple problems that I've written. Um, should I just put the link in the chat?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, feel free to do that, and then I can share screen with the statement as well.
Okay, so I'd say I put one problem in the chat. So I'd say this is like a problem I wrote for my school's club contest, and I'd say this is like the first problem that I was proud of. And so just like TLDR was you have a sequence of arithmetic sequence or like Yeah, you have sequence of integers, which start with a, and there's b integers, so it's a plus 1, a plus 2, all the way to a plus b minus 1. And so then you wanted to partition the set into two non-empty sets such that each element belongs to exactly one set, and the GCD of the sums of the sets is maximized. So the way I came up with this problem is that I think I was actually just scrolling through Code Forces blogs, and I saw some problem about like the GCD of like I don't know, I just think it was just some blog about the GCD. And I was also thinking about like sequences of integers at the time. So I kind of combined those two thoughts and I came up with this problem. And I think it ended up being a little harder than I expected it. But yeah, so I guess this was the first problem that I thought was like, oh, this is actually a good problem. And so yeah, the second problem I can kind of talk about is from the code forces round. Okay, yeah, so this one it's a little longer. And so here you're given two permutations, and then there's an operation that you do by selecting some index and then cyclically shifting both the subarray to the left of it and to the right of it once to the right, and you have to turn one permutation into the other. And so uh this problem I came up with it. I think again, I was actually just trying to write a problem for my school contest. So I was thinking about permutations, then I came up with this operation, and then I was like, oh, can we sort it? And so I kind of guessed that it would always be possible to sort if it wasn't of length two. And and then I came up with like a really bad construction, but I wanted to make sure that it was actually correct. So I asked my friend to write a brute force to make sure like, oh, it's always possible to solve. And then he said, oh, the brute force is always finding a sequence of operations that takes like only n steps. So I was like, oh, maybe I can try to solve this in only n steps. And so I think I thought about it for like around a week, and then I came up with something that actually takes two n steps, and it ended up being hard enough for div 1f. And then the third problem, this was actually proposed to Yusuko. Yeah, so here you have to construct a sequence of at most 100 integers such that the sum is m and the XOR of the pop counts, which is just the number of bits, is k. And so for this problem, it kind of was very much on the kind of like the structure kind of and then operation kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where I just thought about, oh, if I have a sequence, what are some kind of conditions that I can impose on the sequence? And so one of them was, oh, I can like maybe say the sequence has to have some specific sum, or and then I was trying to like try out a lot of different other conditions. And so so yeah, eventually I landed on this thing where like the XOR of the pod counts. I thought that was interesting. And yeah, it ended up being good enough to be used in Yusuko. How are we supposed to solve this code forces problem if you're strong at this type of problem and it takes even you a whole week? So actually, yeah, I don't know. For some reason, when I thought of the problem, initially I thought it was really hard. So I was like, maybe I can do something with like the polynomial that defines a permutation. So I was thinking about like some really strange solution like that, but that ended up going nowhere. So when I tried to like think about like what's a really simple way to solve the problem, I was like, what if we just like move everything to the end, and if I can't move everything to the, or I think move it to the beginning, but if I can't move everything to the beginning, and that's fine, and I'll just fix that later. And apparently that just worked, and I was like pretty surprised. And so uh I guess yeah, that's just a way to think about like a hard problem because like constructive is an area that I'm generally good at, and it was a problem that took me a while, so that's how I was able to set a problem that was like really, really hard.
Yeah, thanks for your, I guess, insights into this. I guess a fun fact is like I believe only one person solved that problem in contest, so it seems quite difficult, but it's good to see like you can it's easy to, or it's easier relatively to come up with extremely hard problems yourself because you have so many resources at your disposal when you're thinking of it. I think, Ben, you obviously have a lot of experience with setting different problems. Do you want to go over your kind of ideation process and then go over some problems yourself?
Sure. I guess it's like mostly similar to what Akash said. Like sometimes I like, see some problem and then I like think I need to solve some problem, sub problem that like seems really hard. And it turns out I didn't need to solve that sub problem, but like that sub problem itself is like pretty interesting on its own. So I just made that a different problem. Yeah, that's one case. Other times, like I guess what like Suha said, like if you like see something in like a game or like maybe real life and think like, oh, like that's like actually like pretty like interesting. Like it could like easily be turned into a problem if you like add some constraints and like that can be something. Other times you just like start with some like I don't know, like some like really simple topic, I guess, and then like try to like create something out of that. Like for example, like one of the plot problems from this season was like let's say you have two integers a and b, then like yeah, okay, but I want to make a problem that involves a plus b, right? So like, okay, let's do some operations where they're either like a plus equals b or b plus equals a. Then like what can like then like what pairs can you get out of that? And like if you want to reach a pair C comma D, like how many operations do you need to do that? Like what's the minimum number of operations? Then like this sound is going to end up being like I think it's like relatively easier if like everything is like positive, but if like you allow integers to like go negative, it's like it increases the like complexity quite a bit. So like it's just like a pretty simple idea, but like it ended up on like platinum, which I thought was like, pretty cool. As for making easy problems, I mostly like do not aim to make easy problems. It's just that like some of my problems like happen to be easier than others. And I'm like, okay, like maybe we can like lower the initial division if I like originally put it in like yeah. I mean I don't really write bronze problems for the most part, unless it's like I start off from some like the idea like I already think it's pretty easy. Like I think for example, I think like this season one of my bronze problems was just like taking like one of Suez's problems that had like the same title, and I'm like, okay, let's like make a different problem, but like in a similar vein. So yeah, if you modify a bronze problem, I guess you're probably gonna end up with a bronze problem. But yeah, as for a specific problem I wrote, this comes from like I guess like the first thing I mentioned, which was like solving, like trying to solve some problem I like did not actually need to solve. This that Ryan, could you share the link I sent you?
Of the guide link or
The
the painting?
ID,
Yeah, sure.
the painting. Yeah.
Uh,
So basically, I was like reading a code versus problem. Like it was the last problem of the round, and I'm like, okay, this like looks pretty hard. I like don't know how to solve it. Then I thought for a bit, but like it was like a problem where like you had like many different queries. And I like couldn't even figure out how you like do like a single query. So I'm like, wow, this must be like pretty hard. But then like and then I like look at the editorial after the
wait,
contents. It's like
should I be on this one or this one?
just share the ID is fine.
Yeah.
Go down to the end. I guess you can like zoom in a bit on the code. So like the main idea is that like you have like a grid, uh, and the grid is defined by two arrays. One array is for, let's say C, it corresponds to the columns of the grid. The other is like R, which is the rows of the grid. And you first construct the grid by like, uh, let me run the code and then paste it. Okay, so in the code, you can see two arrays, C and R, vectors of instance C++. Then you can define a 2D grid by like adding one integer from the row array with one integer from the column array. So the entry at I comma j of the grid is Ri plus Cj. And then okay, that's the top grid in the output, which is just the sums of the two arrays in the input. Then you can construct a grid which is either black or white by just like checking whether each integer in the grid is like greater or equal to 0 or not. That gives you like x is black, dot is white here. Now you just want to like count the number of connected components in this graph, where a connected component consists of like black cells that are like connected adjacently, vertically and horizontally. So in this like grid on the right hand side of the screen, you can see like 4 connected components, 5, the outer one, and then the 4 of them within. And like the connected components can like look a little strange, I guess. Like they can have holes, so it's like not. It makes it like a little complicated. The original problem, like I think it just like ignored the holes, and it ended up like using like completely different observations. But like, yeah, the original problem that this was based off of was actually like based on it had like a bunch of queries where like the threshold for querying black was like varying, and you needed like you had each query would have a different threshold to color like the cell black, and then like for each one you needed to answer some query about like the connected components, which is like ended up being completely different. But I thought this I thought this version was like much more natural for some reason. I don't know why they didn't add this version. But yeah, this also ended up being like the last problem of like a go versus round. So basically I just like look for ideas, I guess, and I think of how to like modify them a bit. And the trivial solution is like just like just DFS each connected component independently, but that's like too slow because like the grid can be really huge, even if the input arrays like aren't that large. Like if the input arrays have size less than or equal to 10 to the 5th, like the entire grid can like uh, have like size 10 to the 10th, which is like too large. So like you need to like think of some like smarter ways to count the connecting components. And there can be like a lot of connecting components. Like maybe like maybe the number of connecting components can be like proportional to the size of the grid. So like you can't just like process each of them independently. And you can like construct like a lot of like interesting looking grids using like just 2 arrays. So it's like I guess it's a pretty like non-trivial structure. But yeah, it's not like an insanely difficult problem. Like more than 10 people solved it during the contest, even though it's like the last problem. So I feel like it's like the difficulty is like pretty balanced. But yeah, you can feel free to give it a shot. I think that's all I'll say about this problem.
Yeah, thanks for going over that. I think this season I was on the receiving end of a lot of Ben's platinum problems, and I must say I enjoy it more when he goes on the easier side of problem setting rather than the one A plus B problem, which I find quite difficult in contest. Um, yeah, I think Suhas, you can kind of go next on your own ideation strategies and then some problems you've done in the past.
Sure, sure. So I think the other two people have kind of covered most of the main strategies, kind of like working backwards from a solution, seeing ideas in the real world, or like adapting already existing problems. I guess I'll use my time to then reiterate the like seeing things in the real world and the fact that like I don't know, I feel like for me, problems often come from like very strange places and very random places. For example, like I will often joke with my parents that like I'm not excited to watch Squid Game. For if you're familiar with the show Squid Game, I'm not excited to watch Squid Game for the actual show, but rather for like the treasure trove of ideas that are like contained within the show itself. I think I've already written like 3 problems off of just like random Squid Game games. Cause like you see a lot of these things in the world that like have a lot of cool concepts. Like other people in the world are doing a lot of thinking on your behalf to like come up with cool ideas. And now like you get to be the person to like bridge it together into a problem. And I think that's like that's pretty fun. So I'd say like inspiration comes from random places. I'll touch on it more with the specific problem. As far as like easy problems go, I think people have said this already, but like you never aim to write an easy problem. I think you don't also really aim to write a hard problem. It kind of just happens naturally. Um, I guess like I've written a few bronze problems, but I feel like most of them kind of just happen where it's like you're coming up with this idea. Maybe occasionally you'll strike like a hard one, occasionally you'll strike an easy one. And then for coming up with problems near or higher than your own skill level, I think that's a very tricky question. I think probably the best thing that can help with that is writing brute force checkers. Um, basically, like you're coming up with this idea, you want to extend it to like bigger bounds, and like you have this idea that you think will solve this problem, right? And it turns out you're wrong. And the only way that you can figure out you're wrong is if you like write a brute force checker to kind of like enumerate a bunch of like possibilities, test your idea against it, And then like you can go back to the drawing board, iterate, and then test it against the brute force checker. And kind of like this repeated process, similar to what Akash said about like the factor that you have versus like other contestants is you have infinite time. Like you have the ability to just like come up with as many wrong ideas as you can until like maybe occasionally you'll find the right idea that works. Um, I don't know. Or you can actually come up with like mathematical proofs, but like sometimes like if you're lazy or the proofs are hard, that can oftentimes be a strategy that can convince you of correctness without actually proving it. And then you can later on try to prove it in the end. So I'd say like coming up with problems higher than your skill level is like a tricky concept. I'm sure Ben can attest to like the fact that like there are problems that I have proposed for like silver that like then somehow jump up to gold or like maybe to plat. Like the figuring out where the difficulty of a problem actually lies is not necessarily the easiest task when you have like full knowledge of the solution yourself, because it's really dependent on what other people think of the problem. So I guess for an actually specific example, I'll just send it in the chat. But yeah, so I'm a part of a club at my school where we essentially try and like prep people for the algorithms, teach them like leak code concepts, and we try to make like fun little presentations, right? And so one of the things when we're covering like BFS, DFS, and graphs, one of the things we put on our slides is this meme from XKCD. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but I think it's a pretty good meme. Ryan, I don't know. Okay, yeah. So it's just this meme. It's pretty silly, but it's essentially like bread first search, right? Like you just look at the top and there's bread. And I don't know, like sometimes I'll just look at this and I'll be like, this is a funny little comic. I feel like there can be a problem made of it. And then what this ended up becoming is one of my favorite problems, which is a problem fully just titled bread first search, where the idea of the problem is essentially it's a BFS, except like some nodes will have bread, and then if there's bread, you go there instead. So it's like an algorithm that like switches between like BFS and DFS. And I guess like without going into the details of this problem, the reason I like this problem is because like I started off with a lot of bad ideas. And I think like over time with like a brute force checker, I was able to like, okay, like I can see the issues of my original idea and kind of like update it like further and further to the point where like this problem that was born out of like a very silly meme ended up becoming like the hardest problem on that contest that we put it on for Code Sprint LA. So I guess like even problems born from the most strangest of places can like flourish into something greater. I think like even in this past bronze, the whole like it's Muin time, like there that's an example of a problem I had the title before I had the problem. I was just like cows and like I don't know, the Morbin time meme. I was like, I kind of want to just write a problem called it's Muin time. I didn't even think of like what the specific problem would be. I was just like, how can I write a problem that I can then call it's Muin time? And kind of the problem was then born from there, and I guess like iterated on by various other authors into the to the future form. So I guess problems can come from very strange places. And I guess I can never harp on the importance of brute force checkers enough to kind of like make sure that your ideas are correct. Also, like as an author, you want to ensure that your solution is like very resilient against edge cases, because like even if you have the right idea, there are often times where you'll miss an edge case or two that are like failure solution. So it's helpful to have like some amount of confidence that like the solutions you're putting out, the test cases you're putting out are fully accurate. So yeah, that's probably my spiel.
Oh yeah, I want to like add on to that because like for one of the problems that like Suho's proposed like this year, it was like it originally in bronze, but then it like got moved up to like platinum because I was like why is this in bronze? I have no idea why this is in this category. And then I like asked Suho's for his like solution, and I think like it ended up like being wrong. So like I had to like go back and forth with him like a couple times to like fix it. And then like okay, after it was fixed, I was like still like not convinced that I was like actually correct. So like I needed to like think of I knew how to solve it a different way, but like uh and like Sue has looked simple his solution looked simpler, but I still like didn't quite believe it. So I needed to like run a bunch of additional tests and like actually like come up with for some reason like why it was like equivalent before like we finally ended up using it. So yeah, I thought that was like a pretty funny thing.
Yeah, for the sake of the audience, can you tell us which problem that was, I suppose?
Oh yeah,
I
it
w-
was called like Shockwave. I can link it in the chat. It was
That's
like,
that was the problem that I was thinking of when you guys talked about that, so I don't know. I do remember
Yeah.
that problem very vividly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I first wrote it, I was just kind of like, oh, like this seems like pretty easy of an idea. Like surely it's just like a bronze problem. And then like I kind of like actually tried solving it and I was like, okay, maybe I'll go up to silver. Like surely like it's not much higher than that. And then I eventually made its way to platinum.
Right, yeah. That's great. I think another like sort of important aspect in setting a problem, especially or mostly in these OI contests where there are subtasks, is kind of what are your goals when you're writing these subtasks, and how do you um, sort of determine the point distributions for problems? Like, how do you avoid giving away too much while still making the subtasks meaningful and sometimes lead towards the answer? I guess, Akash, we can start with you again.
Okay. I don't have like a lot of experience with writing subtasks for Olympiad problems, but generally the subtask should guide the person to the solution. And also if you solve like an easier version of the problem, like maybe with like an n squared, before you realize, oh, we can optimize this to O of n or O of n log n, that could also be a potential subtask, but I don't really have a lot to say here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't have that much to say either. It's mostly just like if you like look at the intended solution. Well, at least for me, it's like if you look at the intended solution and you look at, oh, what if you like only had like this portion of the solution? Like what constraints could you solve? And like give at least like some credit for that. But it's like pretty subjective how much you want to like actually give it.
Yeah, I think PC contest style doesn't really have subtasks, and I think they cover the OI style pretty well.
All right, yeah. I think the next thing that we'll talk about is sort of competition management. So, and all of you guys kind of sort of played a big role in your respective organizing contests. So, sort of what's it like managing a large contest behind the scenes, in like receiving problems and determining which problems to put on, etc. And can you share like a memorable like a moment when you organized the contest, like UCCode Code Forces or UCLA, and then sort of some interesting things about the logistics that most people don't see in sort of like testing, rejudging, and fixing edge cases, etc. Akash.
Okay, so I think out of all the contests I organized, Code Forces was probably the most stressful because I knew there would be like the most number of participants out of any contest I had ever organized. And like no one wants to be known as Tractor and get like negative a billion downvotes. So I didn't want that to happen. So I really spent a lot of time like kind of agonizing over every aspect. Like, for example, like I guess I double checked all the checkers and the validators and all the tests stuff. And it was also stressful because I remember a week before the contest, this contest had already been scheduled. Some like Chinese LGM came and said our F was actually like well known in China. And so it's like we did not have an F, but what we did have is we had an extra E. So we turned our current E into F, and then we inserted our E into the contest, and it ended up being fine. But I remember that being like really stressful at the time. Uh, and I'd say Yusuke was actually the exact opposite because I just came up with the problem. Actually, the problem was a problem that was kind of I had rejected from the CPI's contest, use code guide contest. I rejected it because I was like, I think there's too much casework. So I actually just like, oh, so I sent it to Ben and I was like, and from there, I don't think I touched anything. I just told them how I thought the test should be made, but I didn't even make the test. So that was probably the least stressful problem experience setting experience I've ever had. And then CPI was somewhere in the middle because I was still like, checking everything, but it didn't really have as much stress as the Code Forces round because for the most part things went smoothly and we had a lot of problems. I think one problem had to be removed, but we still had a lot of problems, so it wasn't that stressful. And yeah.
Yeah, about what Akash said. Yeah, East Coast like pretty flexible. It's mostly just like I look at the problem and I'm like, does this look okay to me? And I'm like, sure. And then like if it looks okay to other people too, then it's like, okay, we might as well use it. Like we don't have like that stringent standards as long as it like seems fine. As for like, what was the question about unique experiences, I guess? I feel
Yeah.
like there was like one point in time where like Brian Dean like looked at the bronze contest and he was like, wow, this is like really hard. And then I was thinking, but he was like looking at the easiest problem. So I was thinking like, where have you been for like the past season? But yeah. Anyway, I guess as for like Yusuko management, I guess like compared to like before when I started problem setting, like I tried to like now I encourage people to like try to like submit like a lot of like wrong and like slow solutions just to like make sure they like don't actually pass all the test cases. Because back when I was a contestant, like I just submit some like n squared brute force to some like 2 times 10 to the fifth problem and it'll just like pass. And I'm like, okay, I'll just like move on to the next problem. So I feel like even though like the test data is often weak sometimes, it's like definitely better than when I was a contestant. Because if I look at back at like the testing from before up when I was like a contestant, I like look at the solutions submitted and they're all like 100% correct. And I'm like, where are like the wrong solutions? Like you need to like at least like make sure that like if something wrong, it's like fails, right? So yeah, at least we like put more effort into that, even though like you might not always like see it as a contestant because usually like I mean, even like you usually don't like check the test cases, even if they're like available after the contest. Sure. And I guess one thing about like test cases is that we like don't actually like get to see contestant solutions like most of the time. So even if you like choose something and like you're worried about like the test data like changing after the contest, it's like probably not going to happen because like we don't actually like see your solution. So yeah.
Yeah, so for my end, I guess it's very different because for Code Sprint LA, the team of people that work on our competition, if I had to put a Code Forces rating on it, most people don't even do Code Forces, but like people are probably like sub 1900s, you know, like the people are people who are interested in competitive programming, but we're not necessarily the most skilled bunch, right? Like our top rated person might be like 2100, right? So we have to write this competition. And I think the year that I was director for this competition, we saw that one of the people who had signed up for our contest was Tourist, along with the team of like Eknerwala, I think was on there. Like it was a very strong team. It was Kevin's son, Eknerwala, and Tourist. And we kind of look at our contest and we're just like, oh no, like we don't know if we can necessarily like provide a high quality contest that is like challenging to not just them but like all the other countless like GMs who have decided to participate in our contest. And I guess this kind of goes back to the how do you write problems that are harder, but more importantly, like because we're such a smaller team, like even if we come up with a hard problem idea, getting test solves for it is incredibly hard because like there might be one person in our club who is like qualified to test solve like any problem at a time. And like oftentimes what'll happen is like we spoil our test solvers, right? Because like people are not able to test solve our problems. And so like oftentimes we share our solutions, which spoiler alert, that's a terrible thing to do to like kind of share your own judge solutions with your test solvers. So it creates this like slightly messy situation where like we are not necessarily like 100% sure in our test data. Like we're pretty confident and like we do our darndest best to kind of ensure that they're good, but like nothing can ever prepare us for the stress of actual competition time. Because I think what happened that year is like the competition started and we're like, okay, like we put forward a good contest. Like this team was like, we'll probably blow through it in like an hour. There's 3 computers too. Like things should be smooth sailing. And I think like we're 3 hours in and one of our problems has gone unsolved. And like all of us in the back room just start to freak out of our minds. We're like, oh no, like have we messed up the test data? Like is the problem wrong? Like maybe people aren't solving it because like the problem is completely like just completely like bad. Anyways, like there's definitely a lot of stress that happens during competition time, and it ended up working out. The problem was real. It was kind of one of those examples where we thought it was an easy problem, but I think like you know when you're presented with a lot of problems you can't necessarily ID which one is easy, and it takes like a lot longer for teams to get to it. But it's definitely very stressful moments like that that make it very fun. It makes it very satisfying when you're like, okay, wait, we actually like put a good contest out. It's not that we're like we're bad problem writers or anything. Like it's always like a little fun thing to look back on. But it's definitely very stressful in the moment, very unique to like our situation because like we don't really have friends who we can like give our problems to, like we're infinitely smarter and like get back a solution really quickly. Like we kind of just have to like work on it ourselves and like hack at it a bunch of times until like we're like confident it'll pass. So it's definitely a bit of a stranger circumstance, but very, very fun all together.
Yeah, I actually remember that UCLA contest as well, and I participated in that. And I think for the problem you're referring to, I believe that everyone in my team came up with like really trivial solutions to it, and then we were all surprised they did not pass. And then I think at like the very end, we made like a small tweak and it passed. So I think that was a pretty cool contest that was sort of hard to think about, and then it did stump tourists for like 3 hours. So it's pretty cool. Um, I guess let's kind of start transitioning to the Q&A, but before that, um, do any of you have like funny or like weird or unexpected things that have happened when you're preparing or running a contest, and just some funny stories you'd like to share with the audience? I do know that Ben is not allowed to share like classified stuff on Usico, but for the unclassified stuff, I guess what are some funny moments that you guys have had to deal with? Starting with the question.
Okay, so I'll kind of just elaborate a little bit on that problem I was talking about earlier. So I came up with this problem and I thought actually it wasn't that hard because the solution ended up being like really simple. And so I sent it to this like GM and then he didn't solve it. So I was like, huh, maybe it's a little harder than I thought. And then I sent it to our code forces coordinator and he was like really high IGM or low LGM. And then he didn't solve it either. So I'm like, what's going on? Is this problem not even solvable? And then I sent it to Ben and he didn't solve and then while testing it, he didn't solve it either. And it ended up being H from the round. So this goes back to the setting problems above your skill level. Generally, like I think it's really hard to tell how hard your own problems are because you're looking at it from a completely different perspective than a person who's solving it for the first time. And then also after I sent that to the coordinator, he ghosted me for 2 weeks and then told me that the Div 1 round would be scheduled in 2 weeks. And so yeah, I remember that was also like really stressful because we were not expecting that to happen and we were still missing like one of the problems.
Oh, I mean, this is not like a funny story, but like if you were tracking the US Open like gold leaderboard, you might have noticed it reduced in like size quite significantly. So yeah, we are working on like cleaning up the leaderboards.
I guess on my end, I'm very much so a leap before I look kind of programmer, where I will tend to submit just a lot of solutions very early on, maybe not do as much checking as I should do. And so one of the things that I think is very funny is when we're usually preparing USICO contests, I'll write like a solution for one of my problems. I'm like pretty sure the idea is correct. Um, and then I'll like go to bed maybe, and then the next day I'll wake up to a text message from Ben saying added another test, and it'll be him kind of like putting an edge case that failed my code, and then I'll go back, I'll like be like, oh, I know exactly what this is failing. I'll write up another solution. I'm like, this for sure will work. I'll go back, and then I'll see another text that's like added another test. So it's definitely very funny to see these like the back and forth exchange, and I've definitely started, maybe I'm not fully there, started to get a little more careful about writing brute force checkers and assessing the validity of my code before I submit it as a solution to our problems. But at the very least, we get better test data out of it. So maybe it's not a bad thing altogether.
All right, yeah, great. I think we can transition fully to the Q&A. For everyone in the meeting and on the live stream, again, you can kind of, I think Ryan Cho has been periodically sending out the submission form, and we'll just be going over some of the more interesting responses that we've gotten. So I guess the first question on the submission form was, how has your style of problem setting uh, changed as you've gained more experience in it, or has it changed at all?
I guess I can answer it first. So I think when I started, I think it was a lot more like bad problems where like I would just come up with something and then I'd find out that it's like well known for like a lot of years. So I think I tried to basically come up with a lot more like problems where like I think the situation's a little bit strange or like I don't think someone could think of this situation before. So I try to like do that so I can come up with a new problem. I'd say that's the main thing.
Uh, oh wait, actually, I forgot to like mention something for the last section, but something I wanted to mention that is like maybe a little funny is like there are like been like several useful prompts, platinum prompts that like overlap quite significantly with like Twitter. Like I think like a couple of seasons ago, I like set some prompt about like equilateral triangles, and then like a few months later, I realized that I had actually done like almost that exact same problem on Twitter, and then like no one had like actually like noticed, and so or at least no one had like told me until like several months after the contest. So like even if your problem is like well known, I guess it like most people won't know it, so it's maybe fine. I think this also like happened like this season where like one of the useful partner problems from like December was like after the contest, like someone told me, oh, like this like appeared almost exactly in the same form as like an Twitter contest like a week ago. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's like definitely not intentional, but yeah. I think this also happened with another problem with like this season where it was like pretty weighted to the Twitter problem from like within like a year. So I guess the lesson is you should do Twitter. As for problem style changes, I guess this has also happened in the reverse direction, where like a useful platinum problem appeared in the ad code contest like several years later, and then like the first comment on like the code versus the blog was like, "Oh, I solved this problem on the useful contest." I'm like, okay, at least it happened in the other direction, at least once. As for her problem style changing, I don't think like I don't really know. I mean, I guess if you've done my problems, you can like tell me, but I don't know like change in any significant way.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if the style of problems I've had have changed, but I guess like something I kind of noticed is that I feel like writing problems is a very like creative endeavor, so to speak. And so one of the things I sometimes find myself in is like writer's block, or so to speak, where it's like, oh man, like I came up with this really good problem like a while ago. Like, am I ever gonna top that? Like, I have no fresh ideas coming to my mind. Like, man, and then kind of like I don't know, like you get down in those dumps, you get down in those feelings a little, and then over time, like you start thinking like passively, and then maybe an idea will pop up, and you're like, no, wait, maybe I'm actually a proper writer. I can still do this. Like I didn't peak like a while ago, and then you kind of like hit those ups and downs as you go. So I don't know, it's kind of like an interesting progression. I'd like to think that like there's still room for growth. Like I haven't hit my peak, but yeah, it's like a fun little progression that happens. I feel like the more you write problems.
All right. I guess one common question I've noticed in the form is how do I submit user code problems? I think that Ben actually has a blog on this, so you guys can go check that out. But yeah, try not to submit past coder problems is a tip that I would say. Um, I think Ben, if you want to link that blog, or if you think there's
Oh,
anything you want to answer here.
I mean, yeah, I can like link it. I mean, you can just like email me if you like have a proposal.
Yeah. The next, like, I guess, interesting question that was on the form is, would you recommend problem setting as a way to get better at solving problems?
I guess I can answer first. I'd say not really. I think there's a lot of people who are really successful at competitive programming and haven't really done much problem setting. And so I don't necessarily think that it directly helps with competitive programming, but I think if you find it fun, then you should try it out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like, it's not like something you need to do, but like, I mean, I do think like the mindset can be helpful sometimes. Like, oh, like if the problem was like instead this constraint or like this change, like, then you still solve the problem. But then problem setting ends up like sort of just being like pretty similar to like problem solving sometimes.
Oh wait, actually I do have one thing to add on it. I think I promoted to Plat because one of the problems I had written before, so I guess there it helped.
Yeah, I feel like it also depends on what kind of person you are. Like personally, I don't really enjoy competing as much. And so what I found is that by problem writing, which is something that I do enjoy, I'm able to learn about competitive programming in a similar manner, like learn different techniques, learn by like test solving other people's problems, see like smarter people and whatnot, and kind of grow from that, which is like a more self-contained, like not as time setting to kind of just get better at like the problem solving aspect rather than actually competing. So if you're like that kind of person, then like by all means go for it. Also, I guess separately, it can potentially help you metagame through certain problems. Where it's like if you get in the mind of a problem setter, you can be like, oh, like like why might they be doing something like this? Like maybe I don't really know about that front, but if that's something that's interesting, then perhaps.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples?
Gosh, I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I think it's mainly just like getting a better sense for like why certain constraints are set. Maybe like transformations off of like a counting problem. Like maybe they had the original problem and like turned it into a counting problem to make it more interesting. So like doing the original problem might help you like see something. I feel like they're like pretty similar most for the most part, but maybe there's some metagaming that exists.
Alright. The next question on the forum is, how do you manage to come up with the test cases that may break your solutions to proposed problems?
I mean, it's like pretty ad hoc, right? Like it depends on the problem and what solutions you have. Like if you have all correct solutions, then like what are you trying to break?
What the way I try to generate tests is I try to generate like a lot of small tests that would cover like every single situation, and then just randomly generate large tests and then hope that works. And then if there's like something specific where like in the problem where like, oh, the bounds will be or like the bounds will be maximized if like certain conditions are met, or like the solution will run slow if you have certain conditions that are met in the tests, then I try to generate some tests that are like that. But generally it depends on the problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I feel like it's mostly the function of like, okay, we have this slow solution, which is maybe like similar to like the intended, but like this one part is like actually suboptimal. Like, let's try to like at least like break that on a few cases. So it's yeah, it's like a function of like what you're trying to break.
Yeah, I guess it's also worth adding that like the test cases aren't necessarily the only things that need to change. Like sometimes you'll see that like, oh, like maybe my test cases aren't breaking slow solutions and like maybe I should up the bounds of a problem instead and like regenerate test cases off of that.
Yeah, so the next question is sort of, do you guys ever problem set in groups, and is there like a group dynamic when you're making different contests that helps or hurts problem setting?
Yeah. Yeah, I have problem set with other people before. Where it's kind of just like trying to think of an idea, a new idea. But generally when I'm like trying to solve some problem, I would usually do it by myself.
I think this is a hard one. Like for our club, we often try to get our new members who have had like no exposure to competitive programming to try and set problems, which is actually a very difficult task. And so what we oftentimes do is we put everyone in a room. We have some like people who've actually like written a lot of problems before, and then we just are like, let's have 2 hours to come up with a problem. And it sounds like a great idea in theory, and like oftentimes it does not work. It's very hard, I feel like, to like artificially generate problems. I don't think it's impossible. I've had it happen once before where I'm like, oh, like here's like an idea, and then someone will be like, oh, maybe we can take it this way, and like I've had whiteboard like sessions before where we just like work out a bunch of stuff. Maybe like one or two problems have been like that, but I feel like for the most part, it is a very like passive thing. It's not something that you can like artificially be like, okay, I'm gonna put you guys in a room and you're gonna come up with a problem. It's kind of like someone's gonna have an idea. Maybe they'll pitch it to a group once they have an idea, and then another person can take that idea and like improve it. Maybe I'll add this constraint. Maybe I'll add like this modification, and kind of like there's that evolving process. But I'd say like this like group think is not necessarily the most efficient manner.
Yeah, I think for like the initial idea, it's usually just something like I like observed mostly on my own. But then like once you have the initial idea, you can like maybe run it by someone else and they're like, oh, we can like increase the bounds a lot or something, or change it this way, and then the solution becomes much more interesting. And so like even if like the initial idea isn't like that interesting on its own, we can like make it more interesting after that in a group.
Yeah, the next question we have is there like do you guys have a favorite genre of programming tasks? And is there a genre that you wish people explored more or submitted more both as a contestant as and a problem setter?
Yeah, constructive problems. So like I really like solving constructive problems, but at least in Usico they are not very common. That's why I submitted a constructive task to Usico. And so yeah, I'd like to see more of that.
I don't know about this. Or, I mean, I don't have any particular preference.
Yeah, I guess I can't think of any like preference off the top of my head.
Uh, that's fine. I think the next question is, have you ever been sort of surprised by how participants interpreted or solved the problem differently than what you intended, I suppose?
No, I don't think it's happened to me.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this happens unfortunately too often where it's like I come up with this problem, I have like this like super clean idea. I'm like, this is gonna be amazing. And then like test solvers come and then they just like walk through it with like a another like paradigm or something. I think this like I wrote this problem. Let me see if I can find it. It's called Blooper Game. But basically, this problem, I had this like really fun idea where I was like, oh, I'll use like Pigeonhole and like you use Pigeonhole with the priority queue, and this is gonna make it like super clean solution. And then like everyone I gave it to test solve was just like, you can just binary search this. Like you can just binary search this. So I basically made it my life's purpose to make the binary search like as difficult as possible, and I think it succeeded. I think this has like a 7% accept rate on Caddis because that was my own personal vendetta against anyone who tried to binary search it. But yeah, I guess like it's always hard to like people will always find different ways to like come up with different solutions from what you've intended. And you just kind of have to be prepared for that, I guess.
I guess I can't think of any like specific examples like on the top out of the top of my head, but I do remember there being like some problem at like the last camp, which was like supposed to be rather hard. But then like someone solved it really quickly, and then like I looked at the solution, like there was like a magic constant where like it would only iterate up to magic before like breaking or something. I'm like, oh, I mean that's definitely not supposed to pass. Like there's still time in the contest. Let's like update the data. So yeah, that guy didn't end up passing.
Oh God.
I think Rain was the only one who like solved that problem. It didn't end up like being like much implementation though.
So I think maybe something that everyone in the meeting should take away from this is to never submit Ben's task until the last minute. Maybe Tourist is right about that strategy. Um, yeah, I think another question is, how do you sort of self-check the quality of a problem you wrote? And it's like a checklist you go through to make sure it's original and make sure like it's approachable and stuff like that.
So for quality, I think that's just something that comes with setting more problems. Like you could think, like if the observations are clean and the solution is not like too te I mean it can be tedious, but if the solution is like not like terrible to implement, then I kind of like judge the quality kind of like that. As for checking whether problems are new, there's like this tool that I use where I think it's like uses AI or something to try to find a similar problem. I sent it in the chat. I don't know if it's loading right now, but yeah, I just plug the problem in there and then go through a couple pages to check if there's any similar problem.
I guess for me it's mostly just like okay whether like if I like feel like there's something up about this problem then like it's good enough for me and then like we can like check with other people later if we like actually plan to use it. Like yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty much just like taking a step back, really thinking about like, is this problem cool? Like, is this problem interesting? And like kind of trying to figure out that sense of things and then going from there. But yeah, I feel like it's mainly a crowdsource thing because like you always want to be the person rooting for your own problem. Like it's always like, yeah, like my problem's amazing. And it's kind of like other people help you give you the reality check, I'd say.
The next question is, what's your favorite part of writing a problem? This could be like flavor text, test cases, editorial. Um,
I'd say it's watching other people try to solve the problem and seeing, what kind of solutions they have, whether they're wrong or like they're close to the solution. I think it's pretty fun to watch them like get to the solution and solve it.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's like sort of fun when like the test solvers come up with something like pretty different, like I didn't anticipate, but it's still like pretty cool. So
Yeah, I guess I kind of made the comparison to like problem writing as like a form of like creative expression and whatnot. And so I don't know, you're publishing your creative works out to the world. Like you can come up with the wackiest flavor text ever, and like people will have to solve it. Like I feel like that's a pretty funny thing to think about, and like it's pretty fun. Like you can come up with very strange scenarios that like I feel like there's nowhere else you can have this kind of environment and these kinds of scenarios drawn up except for a programming question.
all right, yeah, that sounds great. The next question is sort of what's your take on AI generated problems and what's your take on kind of trying to prevent AI generated submissions to problems, which is increasingly becoming an issue nowadays, I suppose.
do you have an AI generated problem to look at?
Um, I think like Chongjian Ma had in his like Div 4s he sometimes uses AI generated inspired prompts at least, but I think I can find it perhaps, but I'm not
I
sure
don't
I can
know
find it
anything
right now.
about that.
I think for me, I don't think AI can generally write good problems like that are interesting, especially for harder difficulties without it just being like, oh, apply this algorithm or something like that. The one thing that is funny is let me pull it up. So for the global round that we wrote, D was actually a modified version of an AI problem without the less than constraint. So yeah, sometimes I guess you can get inspiration from AI generated problems, but I think generally they aren't too great.
Yeah, I guess going back to the creative writing thing, it is sad to see if like AI would take over that kind of field, similar to like other creative writing forms. I would be sad to see that as well. I guess I used to be an AI doubter, but I guess recently I have come to the realization that like AI is able to solve a lot more than I would have expected, which is also sad to see. I don't know. I guess kind of just like hoping that like people will do these kinds of contests because they enjoy it, and like I don't know, have some faith for humanity that like people aren't like just trying to like use AI to solve it, and like they actually want to think about it themselves and they're interested in the problems.
Yeah. Our next question is, what is the weirdest constraint that you've ever seen or set on a prompt before? I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, but I think this is open to a lot of interpretation.
I can go. Well, I guess the others think. Um, I guess like also I'll also go back to a couple of questions ago where we talked about like one of the ways you can come up with ideas for for problems. I'd say like a big way is classes. Like I don't know, most of the people who compete are probably students. You're going to class. Class is teaching you a lot of interesting stuff, and I feel like it's cool to kind of like you can straight up like take these concepts. I mean, like I said, smart people are doing the thinking for you, coming up with cool creative things, and like you can somehow adapt it and turn it into a problem. So I created a problem called Miyazaki Masterpiece. I'll send it here. This was a problem that it's basically just like given an input string, and given a bunch of query strings, determine like how many of the query strings match the input string with like up to two differences. It's like two substitutions. Um, and this was basically I took a lot of bioinformatics classes, and basically this is very similar to like you have a human genome, and like you're trying to like compare different like if you're sampling like DNA and stuff, like you want to compare where it matches in the human genome, but like you can have like certain things that are different, yada yada yada. And like I don't know, like there was this cool aspect where it was very simple. It's like, oh, if you have two edits, like you divide it into 3 chunks and pigeonhole principle shenanigans, and like one of the chunks must match up. But like one of the strange things about the human genome is that like this only works because every character is equally likely in the human genome. And so I had to somehow arbitrarily enforce that constraint, which is a very strange constraint. So like I think there's a part that says like each character in the string is like generated individually by selecting a character from a random distribution, which I thought was a pretty strange constraint. And it's like it's weird to give like a randomly generated string as input and like I'm guaranteeing you that this string is going to be randomly generated. Um, because like what if we somehow manage to like we can't use fixed data either, because like what if our fixed data just happens to be the one random string that your code breaks on, right? Like your random algorithm should have like some ability to do that. So like our test data has to also be randomly generated, which means like we had to turn a problem that like should just be I give you the input into like an interactive problem, because that way our test case generation can just happen on the fly and like generate the string randomly. It was a whole complicated mess, but I would say that like this is probably one of the stranger constraints of a problem that I've set.
Wait, why can't you generate the whole string at the beginning?
I don't know, I was worried that like, because like if you have a problem, if you have like something that relies on random generation, like it would be sad if like, you have like an X% chance of success and X is like really high. But like what if the one case that we've like crafted and like set as the fixed data like happens to break your solution? Like we just kind of wanted to avoid any kind of shenanigans around that. And so we were like, the safest way to do this is like, instead of like promising them a random generated string that like we are then giving them as a fixed thing, which like, I don't know, that's a little strange. Like, let's just promise them the generation method and then generate it on the fly. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was essentially to just like guarantee to the contestant that this is going to be randomly generated. Like, we don't want to like provide it as a fixed string ourselves.
Oh, okay, I mean, I guess I would probably like look at actual problems to check. I guess for weird constraints, I guess I don't have any off the top of my head. I feel like I have seen some problems where like the solution only works for like sufficiently large inputs. So like then you have like a lower bound on n, which is like a little strange and like something like you don't usually see unless it's like there's some reason it's supposed to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of anything like I feel like I've seen something, but off the top of my head, I think I saw some problem where it's like if you pass 70% of the inputs, then it will be correct. And I was like really confused by that. But I think that's the only thing I remember. I feel like I've seen stranger stuff though. So
All right, yeah. I guess we are running a bit low on time, so we'll just end off with a few. We'll go over like the last few questions now. What advice would you give to aspiring prom setters, and what advice would you give to contestants in the next Yusuka season? I guess we can start with whoever, but yeah.
I mean, like I said before, to get better at problem setting, it's a lot like what people say about getting better at problem solving. Just set more problems and then you'll get a better feel for it. I don't really have any advice for competitors.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, good luck, I guess. That's about it.
All right. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us for the workshop today. I think if hopefully you'll be like competing in all of these contests, go check out Yusuko, of course, and also Akash's Code Forces contest and Suas's Code Sprint thing, which I believe is like coming up, perhaps. I'm not sure. Um, and then yeah, I think the Yusuko problem setters here are clearly out to get you because they don't have good advice for you. So make sure you solve lots of problems and prepare well. We'll be publishing a recording of this on our YouTube channel shortly. So if you want to review anything here, I think if you send us any more questions, we can try to like get you answers to them. We'll keep the form open, but we'll see. Yeah, and thanks for joining us today. You can check out our other initiatives at joincpi.org. And yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you to the panelists for making this event occur.
Wait, actually, are there any like additional questions? Like I thought this was supposed to be like a 90-minute thing, so I'm like free to like answer some more if there like is there anything.
Um, I think if people submit more interesting questions, I suppose. Um, a lot of the problems are like a lot of the questions are, I think, were addressed in the workshops, so I don't really want to go over that again, I suppose.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think we can adjourn now then, uh, unless anybody. I can actually open up the Zoom chat if that'll speed up or expedite the process a bit. So let me do that if y'all want to like thank the prompt setters for doing this or ask any final questions. So I think chat should be open now. Uh,
Oh, I guess about Suhas's thing about like generating prompts based on like classes, I have also done that, like setting a useful Python prompt based on like matching two strings with each other, which like ends up being like pretty relevant to like when you want to like find like common parts to get like of like two like musical pieces, I guess, like match them together.
I usually ask at least two people before I decide to like think that a problem is good to be proposed to any contest, just to make sure like my solution is actually correct.
Well, as you can ask people to review as long as they're like not like the people competing in the contest.
For the how long does it take to set a problem from the idea to the testing? It really depends on the problem. Sometimes like the earlier problems in the contest, they've been there for like years before actually appearing in the contest, or the later problems, maybe you came up with them in the last month or so.
I guess for like cool stories about creating problems that are easy. I think I think I saw some like I was like looking at some video about like I don't know like reshaping arrays or something or like transposing the dimensions of the arrays or something, and then like I think that ended up like becoming like a bronze problem where like you have like one permutation of dimensions and you want to like make it into another one just by like moving some dimensions to the front. But I think it was like not super easy, not like very easy as a bronze problem. So depending on your opinion, it might not count as easy.
I think I wrote a problem called astral superposition in bronze, which is about like stars and then they shift and you have two photos that overlay over one another. I was stargazing in Hawaii and people were taking a bunch of photos in the sky. And I was like, oh, like they're taking photos of the sky and like different photos are in different positions. Like that's pretty cool. Like I wonder if you could like try and like match up the images. And then like I was like, oh, the problem kind of came from there.
Research papers for problem ideas. We have used a problem in camp, which was like, okay, I was like reading some paper. I'm like, hey, there's this like sub problem they solved. That's like a pretty cool like application of like divide and conquer, but it's like also like pretty elementary. It's like only like topics like contestants would know. So like let's just like use it and see what happens. Yeah, I mean people did solve that one.
Yeah, I don't usually like the research paper to problem idea thing, but I think ICPC loves it a lot. My suspicion being that like professors tend to set a lot of problems, and professors are very much so the type of people who are reading research papers in their free time. So I guess expect that in like ICPC style competitions.
As for how long it takes to like set a problem, I mean, it's like pretty variable. From the idea to the testing, like sometimes the idea is like, okay, you like come up with it in like a few minutes. Like I want to like make a cactus problem. It's just like make a problem about like walking on a cactus, and like that's the final problem. And then like okay, and then, yeah. I mean, as for like testing, I mean, it's just like I mean, it depends on when you're going to use the problem. Like if you come up within the summer, you want to use it in the next December contest, you're gonna have to wait a while.
For the one, how different does a problem have to be? Uh, I usually think about like the key ideas. So if the key ideas between the two problems use like the similar observation, then I'd just scratch it immediately. But if it's similar setup but the observations are different, then maybe I'd keep it.
What's up about February Platinum from one? I mean, how to make sure it's actually the observation is actually good. I don't know if it counts as actually good, but it's just if you just like try small cases and like see if there's a pattern is just like a general tactic, I guess.
I don't know if like writing problems to avoid AI is like a strategy that you can apply when you're actually coming up with a problem. Because I feel like what AI is and isn't able to solve is pretty random a lot of the times. Like, I think if an idea or a solution tends to be very simple, it's a lot easier for it to solve. But I still don't think it's a hard and fast rule. I feel like it's kind of like you just like hope and pray that your problem isn't AI solvable, I guess.
I think there are some things you can do to help it not be solved by AI, but I won't really say what specifically.
About the favorite problem question, I mean, the one I mentioned is like one of my favorites, I guess. I mean, there are a lot. I don't have like, I mean, one among like several, I guess.
Yeah, my favorite problem is also probably the div 1F that I talked about. Mostly because the observations seemed kind of simple in a way, even and the problem ended up being pretty hard.
I mean, I about the problem coming up again. It has. I feel like it will happen if you like try to like come up with like really simple ideas. You're eventually gonna like hit on some. You're pretty likely to like hit on something that's like been done already. Figuring out the solution immediately. I guess it depends on the problem. I mean, sometimes you like write the problem and you're like, then you're like, okay, I immediately know this is like doable. I just need to like work out some details. But other times it's like less obvious. I feel like it does not necessarily have to do with like how difficult the problem ends up being. Like sometimes the idea is like pretty obvious to you, but like maybe less obvious to others.
Yeah, I'd say actually generally I come up with a solution on the fast side. Usually if I take a really long time, I might just forget about the problem.
Problems that can be solved with a simple trick. I feel like, I mean, mostly it's just like, okay, I write the problem and then I like figure out if I can solve it. It's not usually not like, oh, I want to like use this trick, one trick to do the problem. For me, math problems, not sure how that's relevant. Problem quality. We don't gauge problem quality. Do we just like use whatever for usability, right?
I feel like the main way you have to gauge problem quality is always like a relative thing. Like for code sprint, it's not a question of like, is this problem a 5 and is this problem a 4.5? It's just like we want to make a set out of like the 20 proposals we have. And like, how do we pick 12 of these 20 proposals such that each problem is good in its own right? They form a good set. I feel like the quality comes from like the contest as a whole. Not like individual problems are obviously good quality and whatnot, but like we want a good cohesion between problems too.
Sure. I guess it's also like pretty subjective. Like maybe if you see some idea for the first time, you're like, oh wait, that's like really cool idea. But then when you see it again, you're like, well, that's like a terrible problem. It's just like a copy of the previous problem. But maybe they were like written independently, or like the second problem you solved actually like came first or something. So it's like hard to say. Worst problems I've ever solved. I feel like there have been like I don't know if this like qualifies as the worst problem, but I feel like sometimes you like I've like done some code versus problem, and the last problem is that there's this like really complicated solution, and then like instead of doing that, like someone just submits some like randomized solution that just it's a really simple solution. It just like passes the case because like no one thought to like test that. But it's like mostly just like problems like they're like the authors didn't like put too much thought into alternative approaches, I guess, and then it ends up being like not what it was intended.
For troll problems, I think like sometimes they're okay to put on contests that are like not that serious, but like on I guess I don't really see many troll problems on Yusaku or like Code Force. I mean sometimes A is troll. I think like a lot of times or like I think one of the like I bet one of the best troll problems I've seen is like this div 2A called subtraction game on Code Forces, and the solution is A plus B.
I feel like they're often like the two A's where you like have to like where you like can think of like some like simple solution then but then you like sort of second guess yourself because maybe it's like not that easy to prove, but then it ends up being correct anyway. So I feel like I like do not really like those types of problems because like I feel like you like come up with a solution. Like you should like have like some like explanation about like why it's correct, not like okay, it passed the samples, it's like good enough.
Yeah, I think that's like more or less most of the questions that have been asked, and we're out of time. Yeah, so if you guys want to, I don't know, check out our other initiatives from CPI. You can see them at joincpi.org. I think Kosh recently hosted a really great contest for us, and then we'll have another edition of that in the fall. And then yeah, check out all of these people's respective contests. You might not heard of Ben's contest. It's called Yusuko actually, and you guys should take that sometime. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We'll upload the recording soon, and yeah, feel free to reach out to CPI to volunteer or help out in all of that.